Now I wanted to talk to you about a very serious problem that I see across the country, in north half of the country especially, when it comes to relating to whitetails and making parcels so attractive that you can't build a quality herd or hunt. And yes, that can happen. I see it all the time. In fact, there's a never-ending cycle, it seems, where people put a lot of resources of time and money into their habitat improvements, and there's a diminishing return each year where there's a lot of deer. They end up coming in at night. You create a nocturnal herd. You put more money into whitetail habitat improvements. You keep seeing that diminishing return. Your hunting success goes down. Your ability to build a quality herd goes down. And at the end of 10 years, at the end of 5 years, whatever it might be, you have a diminishing return to the level where people start calling me, emailing me, and wanting me to come to their property. And they realize that something's missing. They put a lot of time and energy and money into resources, and they're not getting that return of that investment back out because their ability to create, again, a quality herd and hunt has gone down the tubes. In fact, a lot of times clients will tell me, our year 1 or 2, when we didn't have a lot of improvements, were that was our best deer herd. That was when we saw the best buck sign. That's when we had the best ratios. That's when we had the best population. Now 10 years later, they have 3 times more does and fawns. They have a lot of young bucks, and they're not seeing those older bucks. In fact, they're completely avoiding the property, and it all goes back. The more attractive you make your land, you have to manage that level of attraction, and it's easy to create what I call a doe factory. A doe factory is a very bad thing, is a very real thing, and don't let anyone tell you that it's not. If they tell you it's not, they just haven't been out in the whitetail woods enough. They haven't been around to actually analyze this enough. My roots all go back to QDM, creating a quality deer management herd, creating balance in the herd. And that means you can't have too many does and fawns in the property. There's a lot of ways that you can raise your doe numbers, your deer numbers, and there's a lot of ways you can reduce them too. Does and fawns take a high level of stress. They can take a high level of pressure. And because of that, when you're creating quality habitat and you're creating a nocturnal herd, a lot of times it's very deceiving because the does and fawns will stay on your property and they're out there during the daylight and they're running around. It looks like a zoo, looks like a park, and you love it. But a doe factory is a very real problem. And I'm going to tell you, a doe factory, when you have too many does on your land in general, when you have random habitat improvements, and you create this situation where you have a lot of does and fawns, it's hard to step foot on your property without spooking those does and fawns. The does and fawns run around, they run a little ways, they stay. If you go over and spook this stand out, they move to this side. You spook that stand out, they move to this side. A lot of times, does and fawns that are here today are here to stay, and that's especially if you're making quality improvements. The problem with that is mature bucks then stay off your property. Those does and fawns fill space, and once you have enough on your land, especially when we're talking small parcels, 40 acres, 20 acres, 80 acres, even up to 200 to 400 acres in size, you can create so many does and fawns. I've been riding around on a client property and seen over 100 does and fawns just on a 300-acre parcel. We're just riding around, and I'm sure there was that many deer and more on that property that were just does and fawns. So you create an environment where it's really not inviting to bucks during September, most of October, the end of November, December, and January, because those bucks do not want to tolerate that level of stress and pressure. It's a very bad thing. You create a movement where bucks don't want to be on your property the majority of the year. Yeah, sure, you have a lot of does, you have a lot of young bucks, it's very deceiving. But when those mature bucks get to an age of 4, 5, 6, they do not want to live on your land. In fact, they end up getting shot a mile away. You might even protect them as a yearling, year and a half old, a 2.5-year-old, 3-year-old, 3.5-year-old, and then they move somewhere else because they can't tolerate the amount of does and fawns on your property. It's a very real problem. So you create a nocturnal herd for mature bucks. You create a land, and I know there's a lot of you out there like this, where you're hunting during the rut because that's the only time mature bucks are coming through your land. So you're not seeing those mature bucks in the early season. You're not seeing them at the end of the season unless you still have some food plots standing. And then you don't see those mature bucks till the middle of the rut. When they're really rutting, it's a peak rut, and those bucks are actually coming on to look for does. And even then, you're limiting typically the number of mature bucks you're going to see. So you have to create balance. That all goes back to QDM. in creating a population that's in balance with the habitat, creating good sex ratios, and creating adequate buck age structure. So all this, all the concepts that I teach, all the concepts that have worked for me have been born out of that QDM model of creating balance. A way to create a doe factor on your land, and again, that's not a good thing, is everyone should be working on fall cover. Fall cover is high stem count cover. That includes switchgrass, shrubs, hardwood regeneration, could be conifers mixed in, white spruce, white pine, Norway spruce, red cedar. There's a lot of forms of cover, and I like to have daytime browse, which would be briars, woody shrub tips, hardwood regeneration, acorns, chestnuts back in the woods. And that's that great combination of cover. Think about an upland look where you have gray dogwood coming in, some white pines over to the side, red osier dogwood in the area, hardwood regeneration, maybe some aspen starting to pop in. So you have that great upland mix. It all equals high stem count. High stem count is what bucks and the deer herd in general prefer during the fall and going into the winter. If you have high stem count cover and you add summer food sources to that mix, then you create the perfect fawning grounds. And again, does and fawns that are here today are here to stay. So if you have fall food and you have great fall cover and you have summer food and you have that high stem count cover, then you're creating a doe factory of very competitive fawning grounds. The does will come back to year after year. The young female fawns in the group, in that area, the doe fawns, they're gonna stay. A lot of them stay until there's so much competition that they have to leave. And it's not that they're getting outcompeted by mature bucks that are in that herd and they're telling those young deer to stay away. Those does and fawns rule the roost and they keep expanding on your property. If you have that summer food, if you have that fall food, you have that high stem count, then does and fawns are going to take that over. And one big reason is because if you have that type of cover on your small property, which you should, then mature bucks do not want to live there during the summertime. Mostly, largely, high percentage of time where bucks are at during the summer, they are not at during the fall because they need a completely separate set of conditions, unlike does and fawns. Does and fawns, again, they need good food, high stem count cover. If you give that to them year round, they'll stay on your land. Mature bucks, on the other hand, they need summer food sources, but they also need high overstory and shade. They cannot crash their velvet through that thick stem count cover that you would like to have them reside in and where they prefer to reside on during the fall and winter months. And so there's a complete shift of buck movement about the middle of September, end of September, all the way through mid-October, where bucks are living in one spot during the summer and they're moving to their fall and winter range. Around here, we keep tabs on the bucks year round. I did so in the UP in Michigan, even did so in the Thumb area of Michigan in the 80s, mid-80s, all the way through the end of the 90s, where we'd watch bucks in that area in lower Michigan, the Flatland, Thumb area, Cass City, Carroll, Bad Axe, if you know where those are at, where we'd watch those bucks during the summertime, and then we'd locate stands. We'd have 14 to 20 stand setups and all these little 5-10 acre pockets, and we watch those bucks break apart in September when the beans are turning brown and they're getting the last cutting of hay. We'd figure out which woodlot each buck went into, and then we go over there at the end of October, November, and end up shooting the majority of those larger bucks. And that's extended to here in southwest Wisconsin, and that was in northern Michigan up there too, where I found that the mature bucks, where they resided during the summer, was 3/4 of a mile, half mile, mile and a half from where they reside most of the time in fall. Have you guys ever wondered where those mature bucks go that you see during the summertime? Well, they're going somewhere else to a land like this where they're not overpressured by does. You have a balance of does, you have that balance of bucks, and that's where they're living. It all goes back to a lot of poor property plans, poor property designs, poor properties in general for habitat and whitetail habitat. Begin and end with how many does and fawns are on that property during the summertime. Extremely easy. Again, the more habitat improvements you put on your land, the more you have summer and fall food, the more you create that fall and winter cover, the more you have great fawning grounds. Those fawning grounds are competitive, and you can fill your land every year with does and fawns, and that is a very serious and real problem. You can look at your own lands, you can look at lands around you, and if you have the experience to look at that, I really would appreciate it if you'd take this experience and take this advice, because it's going back, it could be the #1 thing that you can do to start to change your deer herd this season. Eliminate the summer food, you eliminate the doe and fawning grounds and that doe factory potential, because they want that alfalfa and soybean. We have alfalfa and soybeans within a half mile of where I'm standing in just about every direction. So there's no need for me to offer summer food here. I let those does and fawns reside out there. Some of them trickle back on here. In fact, when it gets into early September right now, we do not see a lot of does and fawns and bucks in general. We get a little nervous. We have those 1 or 2 nice mature bucks that are our annual core bucks that are around here. But we're out here and we don't see a lot of deer. I can think back to a time my son and I, Jake, we hunted out here out of this blind right down here. This going back to maybe 2014. I couldn't wait for Jake to sit with me, and it was the 15th of September. We were just not seeing a lot of deer at all. He was going to be hunting the next weekend, and so I was a little nervous, but by the time it came to that weekend, 7 bucks, 17 does and fawns, they had all come back around that time. That was right at the same time the beans were turning brown and everyone was getting their last cutting of hay. So they pushed those deer back onto the property. And if you have that summer residence of does and fawns here, they can build to such a level, those mature bucks just aren't coming back until during the rut. The timing for those bucks to come back is between the middle of September and middle of October. Those are those core bucks that you see every year, and a lot of times they'll last till December. If you have bucks on your land from December through October, and they leave the end of October for November, early December, those are not core bucks. A lot of times those bucks might be coming back. They're coming back during the rut to look around, but those are bucks you'd rather have on your land. You can fill your land with so many does and fawns that you actually create a nocturnal buck herd, a nocturnal mature buck herd. You create a property that you can only hunt during the middle of the rut, because that's the only time those bucks will come back. They don't want to stay with all those does and fawns. You do that by summer food, offering summer food. You do that by offering great fall and winter cover. When you combine those two, you create the ultimate doe factory. It is very real. It creates a lot of problems on property around the country. If you're dealing with excessive doe numbers and fawn numbers and those young bucks, the first thing I look at is how much summer food do you have. If you have a lot of summer food, that's part of the problem, not the solution. Especially in areas where you're not trying to pattern deer to a new food plot system, you're not trying to grow numbers, you're trying to maintain or reduce. Summer food, it all goes back to that summer food. That can be one of your biggest problems that you have on your land. Again, I can't stress this enough. You hear me talk about it all the time. Doe factories are real. They're probably the #1 problem because of the amount of attraction that you're putting on your land. That you can create on a land, you can create a situation where as soon as those bucks get to a certain age and they don't want to tolerate that stress of high numbers of does and fawns, they leave your land, and you're creating more of a problem in the area than you are a solution. I'd like to see you be the herd influencer out there. Look for balance. Look for balance in your summer plots. Take a very good hard look at the number of does and fawns that you have on your property. Are you only hunting mature bucks during the rut? Because those are all signs. Are mature bucks not coming onto your land other than under the cover of darkness, middle of night in October, September, and even in December? Those are all signs you've created a doe factory. And I hope that makes sense. It is a #1 problem. I have a lot of experience doing this, and this is what I see around the country. And it's a #1 way to correct problems is really work on those doe factory symptoms on your land this season. Hey, you can turn it around right now, just not planting some of your plots. Really think about those does and fawns, let them be exposed to your neighbors a little bit so they can actually harvest some of those does too. And look at turning your property around this season.